Welcome to Guitar Gym Pro Live. We are doing this one live. I'm going to walk you through some fun stuff, and then we are going to dive in and answer some questions from my community. So let's do a real YouTube style intro here. So you are probably holding your pick wrong, and I'm going to show you how to fix that now. And then I've got 4 questions at least that I'm going to answer that have been pre-submitted by people in my community. You can check that out at school.com/guitargympro if you want to get your questions answered. Plus, I may answer a few questions from the chat depending on what time looks like. All right, so I'm Jake. I've been teaching guitar to the coolest people on the internet for the last 16 years, and today we're going to do some more of that. By the end of this video, you're going to know how to hold your pick, how to practice holding it better, and most importantly, why that's important. We're also going to talk about E and A shape bar chords, doing some muted strums when we're doing acoustic stuff, things like that. So the first thing that I promised is we're going to go over how to hold our pick. A lot of people, when they first start playing, they grab the pick with 1 or 2 fingers, either their index or index and middle, and they just kind of pinch it between their thumb. This makes a lot of sense. It's like we would hold a pencil, and we're holding it in our right hand. Most people write with their right hand. It just makes sense that they would go ahead and try to strum that way. But we run into a few problems when we do that. There's a couple reasons that that's not great. The first is that we have finger oils here. So we have our hands, they don't necessarily sweat like the rest of our skin, but we release like a lot of oils. And the idea is that oil is going to get on your pick, and then you've got every surface that's holding the pick is going to have oil, and it's going to cause it to slip a lot. Also, it's just not as firm of a structure because, in between my fingers here, I've got space, I've got gaps. So instead of that, we actually want to set it on the side of our index finger and then hold it in place with our thumb, because we're going to have less finger oils on the side of our finger, and it's going to give us a much larger surface area on that first finger, and then our thumb's just gently holding it in place. Let me go through with you how I would talk you through doing that. So what I do is I always say, hey, give me a loose thumbs up. So you give me a nice thumbs up, and then you relax it, right? So if I tilt my hand towards you, I do a thumbs up, and then I relax those fingers. Then I'm going to take the pick, and I want the very point of the pick. This one's, let me grab a different color so it's easier to see. Bright yellow is going to be better. Here we go. So the tip of the pick is going to point directly off to my left. So this right here is the point of the pick. And I'm setting that on my index finger. Hopefully you can see that there at least a little bit if I get my shirt in the background there. So the point of the pick is pointing off to the left, and then I set my thumb on it. So then I can bring this pick to the guitar. Now your wrist, we want this to be basically or very much perfectly flat. We want this to be not crooked, not angled this way. And so you may need to adjust the tip of the pick just a little bit to get it to be nice and flat as we're going to strum over the strings. Just keep it super, super nice and neutral there. In general, for technique, we want both of our wrists to be as straight as possible. Now, sometimes, you're going to get a little bend in it so that we can get certain chords, but ideally, we want our wrists to be pretty flat. The more relaxed we are, the better things are going to work out, if that makes sense. So we're going to have less tension. Okay, so anyway, talking about holding the pick. So we're on the side of our first finger. We've got our loose thumbs up. You see there's a lot of space in between here. And as you strum, you'll see a lot of people will have their hand really relaxed, but the fingers curled in. And some people will relax their fingers out. Now, I find if you make, your palm and you just relax your fingers, they naturally curl in. So the most relaxed position for me is to have my fingers curled in, but experiment with it for you. All right, I see we got a question in the chat. Hold on real quick. I'm pulling it to where I can see it. Thanks. Should we let it flex as it touches the strings or hold it firmly? That is a phenomenal question. I will always say that we want to let the pick flex in our fingers. So I use a pretty thick pick. Let me see if I can't show you as we get up here. Mine is, let's see if I can cover my face. There you go. You can see that pick, it's pretty thick, right? It's over a millimeter, 1.2, 1.3, something like that. So I don't want the pick itself to flex, to bend against the string. So I don't want to grip it really hard and just let the pick bend. In general, what we want to do is we want to keep it pretty relaxed. We want to keep it pretty like you can steal the pick from yourself really, really easily. Like if I grab it and I just yank it out of my hand, boom, right away, goes away. That's exactly what I want to be able to do. But in order to have that loose grip on the pick, we have to do something else. Because if I just tell you, oh, get a thick pick, relax your fingers, and strum really light, your guitar strings are just going to yank that pick out of your hand. So here's exactly what we need to do to have this work the best it possibly can. And that's to strum, brush, play the strings really, really lightly. What I want you to do is you imagine that the strings are like a sheet of paper and your pick is a paintbrush. Now, if you go ahead and you just jam that paintbrush into the strings and smear the paint all over, it's not going to give you a clean line. It's not going to look pretty. It's going to do all sorts of things you don't want. It's the same thing. If I grab a chord and I just jab my pick in there, I death grip it and I just force those out of the way. Maybe if I'm playing, a really loud strum on a rock song, occasionally that will work. But if I'm trying to play a song and I'm doing that, it's not going to sound very good and it's going to cause my pick to wiggle in my hand and ultimately get yanked out. So what we want to do is we want to think, I'm just brushing gently over those strings. So here's the best way I think you can practice that. So we want to grip the pick really lightly. We want to brush the strings really lightly. What I would say is whether you have an acoustic electric guitar, what you do is you imagine, you grab your guitar and pretend you're playing acoustic. And in the very next room, your husband, wife, whoever is asleep, and you do not want to wake them up. And so you're strumming intentionally really lightly. Because we can always add more volume through our pickups, through pedals, through the amp, through microphones. For an acoustic guitar, I have an acoustic guitar on the wall over there. That's why I'm pointing there like a crazy person, even though you can't see it, like an acoustic. There we go. The idea, though, is if we practice that way over and over again, we're going to practice playing to where we can control those dynamics. We're not hammering away with the pick, and it's not going to get yanked out of our hands. So again, really light hold on the pick is ideal. And again, I always recommend not that you use a thick pick because you're supposed to use a thick pick, but you should use a thick pick to practice because it helps you develop that touch, that feel, that reaction against the strings really well. And then if you like the sound of a thick pick, by all means, go grab, or a thin pick, by all means, go grab a thin pick, play with a thin pick. You should always choose what you think sounds the best. There's no right or wrong answer. I just find if you can play with a thick pick, you can also definitely play with a thin pick, but not necessarily the other way around. All right. So like I said, we're going to answer some questions. I've got like 4 or 5 queued up here. They're straight out of members of my community. You can join me at schoolwithak.com/guitargympro if you want to make sure your questions are getting answered. And I can hop in and take a few from the chat as we're going as well. So Ricardo had asked, what is an E and A shaped bar chord? And then how do I make those minor or dominant? All right. So again, that's Ricardo's question. So here we go, Ricardo. When we say an E-shaped bar chord, well, what is a bar chord? A bar chord is any chord where we are barring the strings. We're playing multiple strings with one finger. Now, we can have a tiny bar, like if you've learned this F, our index finger bars, 2 strings, it's a bar. But what we call a grand bar, or like the main bar chord we all think of, is the one where our finger goes across all the strings. And so this guy here, this F bar chord, is what we would call an E-shaped bar chord. Why is it E-shaped? So stay with me for a second. If I take this and I play this E chord and I move my fingers up 1 fret, but then I flip them around so that my little 3 fingers are playing the fretted notes, and then I lay my index finger across all the strings, everything has gone up 1 fret. This looks like an E chord. You can see those notes in there, and then my first finger is barring the strings. And so this stays to be an E shape no matter where I bring it, because it looks like an E chord. Now, I don't have a pinky finger, so I'm just kind of muting this D string in the middle here. So I know mine sounds a little messy. I kind of have to adapt and things like that. Again, no pinky finger, but you probably have a pinky finger. So you would have ring finger on 3rd fret of the 5th string, pinky finger on 3rd fret of the 4th, and then middle finger on 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and then your first finger bars across all the strings. Okay, so that is our E-shaped bar chord. Now, the way that we make that minor is if we just lift up our middle finger, it turns that into a minor chord. So it's ring finger on 3rd fret of the 5th, pinky finger on 3rd fret of the the fourth string. Again, I don't have a pinky, so I'm just muting that one. And then we bar with our first finger across all 6 strings. And then that gives us our minor chord. To make it dominant 7, we just lift up our pinky. Well, I don't have a pinky, so you play the major version, middle fingers down, you lift up your pinky, and then that gives us a dominant chord. So that is our E-shaped bar chord. So let's try our A shape. So if everybody knows how to play A, first finger, let's say 4th string, 2nd fret, 3rd string, 2nd fret, middle finger, 2nd string, 2nd fret, ring finger, that's kind of our A chord. Now, what we could do to play that A chord is we could actually just bar across those strings with our index finger, and then I just don't play the high E. I let that mute out, right? I could switch that to use my ring finger for the bar, right? Instead of my index finger for the bar, it's my ring finger. And if I slide that bar up from 2nd fret on strings 4, 3, 2 to 3rd fret, and I use my index finger to play 1st fret on the 5th string, that's going to be an A-shaped bar chord because it looks like my A chord. And so I can move that up as I go, right? So we have our E-shaped bar chords and our A-shaped bar chords. Those are the 2 most common types. Now, one way you might want to try working with these is taking a song that you know, maybe it's got a G chord, a C chord, and a D chord. And we could play the bar chord versions of those, G, C, and D. And I'm finding those, if it's an E-shaped bar chord on this E string, the thickest string, if I just find that note, E, F, F sharp, G, and then I play my bar chord, it's going to be a G chord. I'm naming it based on the E string. If I go to my A string and I play my A shape, I'm going to name it based on the A string. So A sharp, B, C, and then 2 frets up is D. So I can play a song I know. Using those bar chords. So I'm taking the same thing that I would be doing open and I'm applying it to bar chords. All right, so Rylan and Sergio both asked similar questions. So what is a good song for an open mic? Rylan asked. And then what is a good acoustic set list for a bar? Sergio asked. So I think the best thing that we can possibly do for an open mic and a bar is to think about the audience. And so basically, what we want to do, hold on, I think we got a question on bar chords. I'm going to check this out. I still have a problem with other types of chords, like guessing the song's chord by ear. What if they use another type of chord? Non-major minor. Okay, I will answer that. Give me a second. I'm going to answer these and then I will jump in and I will answer yours because that's about learning by ear, and I'll get there. We'll talk about that in just a sec. Okay, so good songs for an open mic and a set list at a bar. What does that look like? Okay. I think that we want to think about the audience when we're playing anything. So if we're going to play at an open blues jam, if we're going to play at a wedding, if we're going to play a corporate event, if we're playing at a local bar, if it's a coffee shop, we should think about what is the end person, like who are we serving with our music and how are we connecting with them? So at a wedding, people are going to want to dance and party. A lot of times at a bar, it'll be the same thing, but it really depends on the kind of bar, right? If it's like a really upscale bar and it's supposed to be classy and kind of like a jazzy vibe might make way more sense. If you're playing an open mic, I think things that get people involved and excited, sing-along songs, things that would be a great set ender for a cover band. So things like Don't Stop Believin' or Sweet Caroline or anything like that would be just a great thing to pick, something that is easy and has 4 chords and everybody could really sing along with and have a great time. I think for a set list for a bar, it depends on how long you're playing. If you're trying to play for an hour, that's going to be different than if you're trying to play for 3 hours. Typically, in my experience, most bar sets are like 3 hours. You want to start with a lot of energy, a lot of excitement, a lot of things people recognize. You want to make sure that they are thinking, wow, this band's fun. The second set, you can usually do things that are a little bit more creative or interesting because they're bought in. And then by the time you get to the third set, you want to just be doing all the bangers that everybody sings along to and everybody loves and is just a massive party for everybody involved. So again, your Don't Stop Believin', Sweet Caroline at the end, things like Tennessee Whiskey or let's see, Life in the Fast Lane by the Eagles, or like something that's maybe a little longer can be that second set. And then your first set is like Wagon Wheel and Michael Jackson songs and things that are going to get people up and dancing and having a blast. And then you could just condense that to beginning, middle, and end instead of 3 separate sets. Okay. All right. The Beatles are always a great thing. I would usually, most Beatles songs, like "Oh Darlin'" is really good. "I Will" can be fun, and I usually put those second set because they're a little more interesting, a little more detailed on the chord progressions and things like that. Versus, really simple, "Georgia Satellites, Keep Your Hands to Yourself" is, usually a little bit more danceable. Okay, so you were asking, you still have a problem with other types of chords. Learning by ear. What if they use another type of chord? Okay, so generally speaking, if I'm learning something by ear, this is the same way I would treat the strumming pattern. I think a lot of times as guitar players, we dive in, we grab the guitar, and we just go ahead and we go, I'm just going to guess chords and try to figure things out. And I don't always think that that's the best way to go about it. I think we should take an extra couple minutes and really dial in on what we're doing. And when we dial in on what we're doing, we're going to be able to connect with the song in a much more deep way. So let me explain what I mean. Let's say we're trying to learn a song in particular. Let's say, let's use just something super, super simple. Let's say we're going to learn Knocking on Heaven's Door by Bob Dylan. Really, really, really simple song. Nothing crazy, not super long. The first thing I'm going to want to do is put on headphones and listen to the song probably all the way through and really pay attention to things that I haven't paid attention to before. Before I even have my guitar in my hands, I want to determine, can I hear how many chords I'm expecting in this song? Where am I expecting that they're going to be? When do I think that they're going to change? Is there anywhere that anything different happens? So, spoiler alert, in Knocking on Heaven's Door, it is the same cycle of chords over and over again the whole song. Each chord lasts a measure, and then you just go on to the next one. It's really nothing super complicated with that one. There's only 4 chords in the song. But again, if you're just trying to guess with your guitar, you're not going to know that off the bat. But you could determine all that by listening and going, okay, well, it's, chord, 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 chord. Oh, we had a new chord there. Okay, so like, where am I expecting things to be different? Where am I expecting them to be the same? And you could listen to a song 1 time, 2 times, 10 times, like really dig into that, really get used to hearing those things. You really want to know the song that you're learning. Once you do that, can you sing like the root note of the song? Can you sing the fundamental of the key? And maybe the answer is no. Maybe you can just sing the root notes of the song or one of the notes in the song. But what I would try to do is, even instead of figuring out what the chords are, could I play a bass line for Knocking on Heaven's Door? Well, I can't use it anymore. Okay, so if I can figure those out, I can get the bass line. I can really feel, okay, what is the root note of the chords that I'm playing? Now I can start figuring out, what chord can I play there? Now, here's a big secret about learning chords and learning harmony. When you are writing a song, you can copyright the lyrics and you can copyright the melody, but you can absolutely not copyright the chord progression, because there's only so many chords and only so many things like that. So the reason I say that is, you could play different chords that would work really well for almost any song that you can find. So generally speaking, you're not looking to do your exact thing, the exact right thing. You're looking to figure out the chords that will work. And then you can always adjust and change and get closer and get closer. So for example, I'm going to just use Knocking on Heaven's Door because we were talking about it. If I play G, D, the next chord is A minor, and then it goes G, D, C. Well, the difference between an A minor chord and a C chord is really just that root note of A instead of the root note of C. It's really, really subtle. But you could play, Mama, take this badge off of me. You could go to C every time. But I can't use it anymore. Or you could go to A minor every time. Mama, take this badge off of me. I can't use it anymore. Now, it doesn't sound exactly like the song, but it's close. And I think instead of trying to think about things as, how do I get it perfect? It's, how do I get it so that everybody around the campfire, everybody at the open mic, everybody could sing along with me, could understand what I'm playing. And when I start singing it, they kind of carry it and it works out great. Okay. So once we figured out our root notes, Then we can start filling it in with the chord. If I know that my root note is G, my first guess is going to be, is it G major or is it G minor? And in this case, it's G major. Knocking on Heaven's Door by Bob Dylan is the one that we're doing now. I saw you just asked what's it called. So that's the biggest thing for me is once I figure out the bass notes, the root notes of the chords, I can hear that sounds right. I'm playing along. I'm playing a guitar part that would fit. Now I can start filling in the chords that go with that. Now here's the key. It's mostly going to be major and minor. Like 98-ish% of the time in a pop song with less than 8 chords, and most of them have 3, 4, 5 tops, it's going to be major or minor. So if you think about other types of chords, people say, oh, well, what about C add 9? Well, C add 9, that's just a version of a C major chord. And so C major will work perfectly fine if the song calls for a C add 9. What about, E7? Well, E7 is just an extension on an E major chord. So an E major chord would work fine. And so most of the time, really most chords you're going to get by with either a major or a minor chord. And then you can start adding in and hearing the nuance and hearing the detail. Oh, is it an A minor chord? Or is it an A minor 7 chord? Or I think a better question to ask is, do you like an A minor chord or an A minor 7 chord? And it's really about your personal preference and your personal choice. That's how I would see it. All right, let's see. We got another question here. Just a little question. What angle of the wrist or hand when you're strumming or striking the string? So you want your wrists to be flat or neutral. And so what do I mean by that? You don't want them to be cocked at an angle, under or over. You just want your wrist to be as straight as possible, right? Like you're, shaking hands, your wrist is just straight. And it's the same with your left hand. Now, when I talk technique, those are always ideals. That's what I'm hoping to do, but that's not exactly what I'm always going to actually do. What do I mean by that? Well, when I go to play this C major chord, I may have to roll my wrist under a little bit to get, my fingers out of the way of the strings. If I have my thumb over here and I'm doing this kind of technique to really have a flat wrist, well, maybe I'm not going to be able to get all the strings to ring. So I have to bend it a little bit, but I want to have it bent as little as possible. The goal is straight, right? And so really what we're just chasing is relaxation. Can we be relaxed everywhere? And when you bend your wrist under or bend it the other way, you're creating tension in your arm, and tension is the enemy of clean strumming, clean picking, clean chord changes, all that stuff. All right, so I got 2 more questions to answer today before we wrap up. So we have, how do I get that chucking sound when strumming? And she's talking about the Steelers Wheel song, Stuck in the Middle. So and this was Karen asking. So how do we do that chucking sound? So all I'm doing is on those down strums. Let's say we're going to do a count of 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and down on the numbers, up on the ands, 1 and chuck and 4 chuck, right? And so all the numbers after 1 are chucks. And what I'm doing is I'm just kind of muting everywhere I can. I'm laying my fingers down to mute the strings. And as I'm striking the strings, let's see if I can't lift this up so you can see it, my palm is resting on the strings. So I get a chucking sound. And this will work just as well on acoustic as it does electric. I'm just trying to chop at the strings. I'm using my palm and the pick at the same time, plus laying the fingers down. That's going to give me the most muted sound I can get. Now, none of this is hard. If you remember when I was talking at the beginning of the lesson here about holding our pick and doing everything lightly, it's the same vibe when we do the chuck. We're not slamming our wrist in there, hitting the strings really hard. We're just gently setting our wrist down, gently laying our fingers over the string without pushing down to get that muted sound on the strings. Okay, last question was from Jake Yakes. My name's Jake, his name's Jake. It's pretty great. We've got, 3 Jakes over in the community. Again, that's schoolwithak.com/guitargympro. If you want to get me to answer your questions like I'm doing on here in lots of detail and knowing you're playing. So he said, I get worn out playing a full song. How do I develop my conditioning? So I have been going back and forth with Jake in the DMs in that school community. And I know that for him, what's happening. So he's able to do the workouts that we have in there. Those are 15 to 20 minutes, and they're just back to back to back to back, do the workout, do the workout, do the workout. So if he's being able to play that much in a row, then it's not a problem of being able to play for that long. Something's happening when we go to really play the song that's tiring him out. And my suspected thing, and we'll wait for him to chime back in here in the next couple days and let us know, but I think what's happening with him is he is going, okay, well, this is for real now. I'm really playing the song along with the recording. So instead of just the practice, now I got to really do it. And tension, which I just said is the enemy of strumming and picking and changing chords, is coming in, and he's really tense, he's really tight, he's really overly worried about getting it just so. Okay, well, that's going to tire you the heck out. So the best thing that you can do is when you're playing, when you're practicing, but also when you get into a performance mode or a way that you're really working on something, is to search your body for tension as you play. So using Knocking on Heaven's Door, again, I'm working on this. I need to go slowly enough that I can search my body for tension. Am I curling my toes? Am I like clenching anywhere? Am I putting my tongue on the roof of my mouth really hard, or gritting my teeth or anything like that? I mean, it's not just my shoulders, it's not just my elbows and wrists, but is there anywhere in my body that I'm letting tension happen? Because if I'm letting that tension come in, then I'm going to tire myself out really, really quickly. This happens a lot of times when we're recording or playing a performance. It feels like, oh, we're on now, and I got to really try, and I got to be ready to do it. But the truth is, the more we can relax, the longer we're going to be able to play. And so again, for Jake, that I'm answering his question, if you are struggling, but it's only when you're playing a song and it's, or performance or recording, and it's not when you're practicing, it's not an endurance or conditioning problem. It's I'm getting too excited and bringing in tension when I'm doing those things. And so it's easier said than done, but the best thing you can do is try to breathe deeply as you're playing. Don't let yourself hold your breath. Don't let yourself tense up. And then actively think about, search your body for tension. Where am I squeezing or being tight that I don't need to be? So hopefully that makes sense and, answers that question. We'll try it. And if you have another question about it, or struggling in another way, again, just hit me up. So today we fixed how we hold our pick. We talked about strumming and how to do it light, how to hold our pick light. Things like that, the wrist angles we're supposed to use when we play. We talked about E and A shaped bar chords. We got good songs for our open mics and set list. And there's just a ton of things. Next time we do a live, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go over how to strum with your fingers instead of the pick. If that's something that is super interesting for you, we'll be doing another one of these soon. And if you want your questions answered by me next time, or you can send me in a video and I can watch it and we can do all the things and get structured coaching, you can join me at Guitar Gym Pro at the link that I'm going to go ahead and pin in the description. All right. Remember, you are always just one song away from momentum that lasts. Y'all have a great day.